The notification chimed just as I pulled into our driveway after 8 months overseas. 3 tours in Afghanistan, countless firefights, and roadside bombs that still made me flinch at loud noises. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the text message from my wife Elise. Don't bother coming in. Locks are changed. Kids don't want you. It's over. Meet. I stared at the screen, engine still running, wondering if this was some kind of sick joke. 8 months of fighting insurgents, sleeping in sand, and dreaming of home. Home to Elise and our kids, Max and Lila. Home to our little house on Maple Street, in this god-forsaken Maine town that somehow looked smaller and grayer than I remembered. As you wish, I typed back. Because what else do you say to 8 years of marriage being ended via text? That's when I noticed the second car in the driveway. A sleek silver Audi that definitely wasn't there when I left. The vanity plate read, "Flip for you." Real estate, probably. I'd seen enough of those guys before deployment. Slick hair, expensive suits, and the kind of confidence that comes from never having someone shoot at you. I parked down the block and walked back, staying in the shadows. Call it military training or just plain old-fashioned curiosity, but I needed to see what I was dealing with. The living room window glowed warm and yellow, and through the gap in the curtains, I got my answer. Elise sat on our couch. My couch, the one I'd saved for 6 months to buy, wearing a black dress I'd never seen before. Next to her, a guy in his late 30s, with perfectly styled hair and a smug expression that made my trigger finger itch. They were drinking wine from our wedding glasses, laughing at something on his phone. 8 months fighting for freedom, I muttered to myself. And here I am, outflanked by a guy with better hair and a German sedan. The guy, had to be the Audi owner, leaned over and kissed my wife. Not a peck on the cheek. A full, passionate kiss that lasted long enough for me to memorize every detail of his face. Square jaw, expensive watch, the kind of tan you get from golf courses, not combat zones. I pulled out my phone and took pictures. Not for some dramatic confrontation, I wasn't that stupid. But if Elise wanted to play hardball, she'd learn that soldiers know something about strategy. Walking back to my truck, I made one phone call. Davidson Law Office. This is Janet. Janet, it's Matt Harlan. Is Bill available? Matt, welcome home, honey. Let me get him. Bill Davidson had handled my will before deployment and helped with some property issues. Good lawyer, better friend, and exactly the kind of guy you want in your corner when your world implodes. Matt, Jesus, good to hear from you. How was Bill? I need you to file emergency divorce papers first thing tomorrow morning. Asset freeze, custody petition, the whole 9 yards. Silence on the other end. Then, what happened? My wife's been playing house with someone else, in my house, with my kids. You have proof? Getting it now. How fast can you move? If you can be in my office at 8 a.m. with evidence and a retainer, I can have papers filed by noon. Done. I hung up and drove to the Riverside Motel, a place that had seen better decades but took cash and didn't ask questions. The clerk, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a smoker's cough, handed me a key to room 12. You okay, hun? You look like someone ran over your dog. Something like that, I said. Something like that. That night, lying on a mattress that had probably hosted 1,000 other broken dreams, I stared at the water-stained ceiling and planned my next move. Elise thought she was so smart, so careful. She'd probably been planning this for months, maybe since I deployed. But she'd made one critical mistake. She'd underestimated me. 24 hours later, my phone exploded with 19 missed calls, all from Elise. I was sitting in Bill Davidson's office, signing papers and transferring money, when she finally got through. Matt, what the hell do you think you're doing? Good morning to you too, sweetheart. How's the new boyfriend? Don't you dare! His name's Greg, right? Greg Dunlop, real estate flipper, drives the Audi with the cute license plate. The silence stretched long enough for me to hear her breathing change. Fear. Good. You can't just freeze our accounts, Matt. I have bills to pay. Our accounts? Funny thing about that. Turns out when you're married to a deployed soldier, moving your boyfriend into the family home while spending marital assets on wine and fancy dresses creates what lawyers call grounds. Bill's got a whole list of them. The kids need their father. Which is why I'll be picking them up from school today. Judge Morrison was very interested in my photos from last night. I hung up and turned to Bill, who was grinning like a shark smelling blood. Emergency custody granted pending full hearing, he said. Asset freeze in place. And Matt, that guy Dunlop has a record. Bar fight in Portland 2 years ago. Restraining order from an ex-girlfriend. Your wife sure knows how to pick them. How'd you find that so fast? I may be a small-town lawyer, but I've got friends at the courthouse. Speaking of which, you might want to talk to your neighbor, Mrs. Gage. She called this morning. Says she's got some interesting stories about the comings and goings at your house. Gage had lived next door for 30 years and knew everything that happened on Maple Street. She was waiting on her porch when I pulled up, a cup of coffee in her hands and a folder thick with papers on her lap. Matthew, she said, standing to hug me. Welcome home, dear. I'm so sorry about all this. What do you know, Mrs. Gage? More than I wanted to, I'm afraid. That man's been staying overnight for 3 months. Different cars sometimes. I think he's trying to hide it. And the children. She shook her head. They've been asking me if Daddy's ever coming home. Broke my heart. Inside were dozens of photographs taken from her kitchen window. Dates and times written in her careful handwriting. Greg's car in my driveway at all hours. Him leaving in the morning wearing yesterday's clothes. Elise kissing him goodbye on my front porch. I started taking pictures when I realized what was happening, she said. Figured you'd need them someday. Mrs. Gage, you're an angel. Oh dear, I'm just a nosy old woman who believes in doing right. The school pickup was a scene. Elise was already there, standing by the flagpole with her arms crossed, and her lawyer, some overdressed guy from Portland, whispering in her ear. When Max and Lila saw me, they broke away from their teacher and ran. Daddy! Lila crashed into my legs, and Max, trying to be tough at 10 years old, settled for a fierce hug around my waist. We missed you so much, Max said. Mom said you might not come back. I'm here now, buddy. I'm not going anywhere. Elise stormed over, her face red with anger and embarrassment. Half the school was watching, including other military families who knew exactly what was happening. You can't just take them, Matt. Actually, I can. I handed her the custody order. Judge Morrison was very clear. Supervised visitation only, pending the hearing. Her lawyer tried to intervene, but Bill appeared at my elbow like a well-dressed guardian angel. Counselor, Bill said pleasantly, I trust you've advised your client about the penalties for violating a court order? The drive home with my kids was the first time I'd felt normal since reading Elise's text. Max told me about his baseball season. Lila showed me her loose tooth. And for 20 minutes, I almost forgot about the mess my life had become. Almost. That evening, after the kids were asleep in their own beds for the first time in months, I sat on my porch with a beer and planned phase 2. Elise had drawn first blood with her text message ambush, but she'd forgotten something important about military strategy. The first strike is rarely the last one. Greg Dunlop worked out of a converted warehouse downtown, the kind of place that screamed, I'm successful but still edgy. His business, Dunlop Properties, specialized in flipping houses and, apparently, flipping other men's wives. I'd spent 3 days learning his routine. Coffee at Starbucks, gym at 10, office by noon, happy hour at Murphy's Pub. I found him in the parking lot of Elise's insurance office on a Thursday afternoon, leaning against his precious Audi while she finished work. He was scrolling through his phone, probably texting his next conquest. Excuse me, I said, walking up with a friendly smile. Your car's leaking something. Oh, he looked up, and I saw the exact moment recognition hit. His face went from annoyed to nervous to trying to look tough in about 3 seconds. You must be the husband, he said, straightening up. Look, man, I don't want any trouble. Trouble? Why would there be trouble? I crouched down and pointed under his car. Right there, see? Looks like transmission fluid. He bent down to look, and I palmed the small tube of axle grease I'd borrowed from Wyatt's garage. When Greg straightened up, I was standing closer, close enough to see the expensive cologne couldn't quite cover the smell of fear sweat. I don't see anything, he said. Huh, must be my mistake. I clapped him on the shoulder, leaving a nice greasy handprint on his white dress shirt. You know, Greg, can I call you Greg? I've been wanting to thank you. Thank me? For taking such good care of my family while I was overseas. Really above and beyond, moving in like that. Most people would just send a casserole. His face flushed red. Now look here. Oh, I am looking. I'm looking real hard. I stepped back and smiled. Army training, you know. We're taught to observe everything. Like how you park in my driveway, sleep in my bed, use my shower. Elise and I are getting divorced. Yes, I heard. Funny thing about divorce proceedings, Greg. Everything comes out. Bank records, phone records, hotel receipts, all of it. Huh. I started walking away, then turned back as if I'd forgotten something. Oh, and Greg, you might want to get that transmission looked at. Wouldn't want it to break down at the worst possible moment. As I reached my truck, I heard his car door slam harder than necessary. Through the office window, I could see Elias watching, her face pale and worried. Good. Let them both worry. That night, Wyatt came over with pizza and beer. We'd served together in Afghanistan, and he'd stayed local after discharge, opening a small garage on the outskirts of town. He was the kind of friend who'd help you move a body without asking questions, though tonight's mission was considerably less dramatic. So this is the famous Greg, he said, studying the photos I'd taken. Looks like the kind of guy who gets his nails done. Probably does. What did you find out about his business? Leverage to the eyeballs, 3 mortgages, 2 business loans, and a line of credit that's maxed out. He's one bad flip away from bankruptcy. Interesting. What about the restraining order? Even better. Ex-girlfriend named Tracy Morrison. Yeah, Judge Morrison's daughter. Seems Greg has a temper when things don't go his way. Threw a drink at her in a restaurant, followed her home, made some threats. Nothing violent enough for jail time, but enough to get him banned from contact. Think Tracy would be interested in knowing about his current situation. I think Tracy would be very interested, especially since the restraining order specifically mentions him not being around children without supervision. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, eating pizza and planning. Outside, Maple Street looked peaceful and normal, but I knew better. War zones always looked quiet right before the shootings started. You sure about this path, Matt? Wyatt asked eventually. Once you start down this road, there's no going back to being the nice guy. The nice guy got his wife stolen and his kids traumatized. The nice guy got a text message divorce after 8 months in a combat zone. I finished my beer and looked at him. I'm done being the nice guy. Then let's make sure we do this right. The next morning, I mailed 3 packages. The first went to Tracy Morrison, containing photos of Greg with Elise and my kids, along with copies of the school pickup incident. The second went to the state licensing board for real estate agents, with documentation of Greg's restraining order and questions about his fitness to handle family properties. The third went to Elise at her office. Inside her package were copies of every photo Mrs. Gage had taken, along with a simple note. Thought you might want these for your scrapbook, Mamas, Min. By noon, my phone was ringing. Matt, we need to talk, Elise said, her voice shaking. Do we? I thought everything was covered in your text message. Don't be like this. We can work something out. You're right. We can. It's called divorce court, and it starts Monday morning. I hung up and smiled. Phase 2 was complete. Time for Phase 3. The abandoned rail yard sat on the east side of town, a sprawling graveyard of rusted boxcars and broken dreams. I'd been using it for morning runs, partly for the exercise and partly because I'd learned Greg took the same route to his office every day. The road that cut through the rail yard was a shortcut that saved him 10 minutes and fed his need to feel rebellious in his luxury sedan. I was stretching against a boxcar when he pulled up that Friday morning, his Audi gleaming in the early sunlight. He got out slowly, looking around like he expected an ambush. Harlan, he called out. We need to settle this like men. I'm listening, I said, not moving from my position. He walked closer, and I could see he'd been working himself up for this confrontation. His jaw was set, his fists clenched, and he had the kind of determined look that meant he'd been practicing his tough guy speech in the mirror. You're going to back off, he said. Stop the games, stop the harassment, and accept that Elise doesn't want you anymore. That's your big speech? I was expecting something with more flair. Maybe a few threats. I'm not threatening you, I'm telling you. Leave us alone, or you'll regret it. I straightened up and started walking deeper into the rail yard. You know what I learned in Afghanistan, Greg? Sometimes the best way to handle a problem is to change the terrain. He followed, which was exactly what I wanted. We wound between rusted boxcars and abandoned equipment, getting further from the road and deeper into the maze of metal. His expensive shoes weren't made for walking on gravel and railroad ties, and I could hear him struggling to keep up. Where are we going? He demanded. Nowhere special. Just thought you might want some privacy for whatever you're planning to do to make me regret things. We reached the center of the yard, where a circle of boxcars created a natural arena. I stopped and turned to face him, noting how his breathing was already labored from the walk. Here's good, I said. Nice and private, no witnesses, no cameras, Just you and me settling this like men. For the first time, doubt flickered across his face. He was probably used to intimidating people in parking lots and restaurants, places where other people would break up any real trouble. Out here, it was just us and the rust. I don't want to fight you, he said, but his voice had lost some of its edge. Good, because I don't want to fight you either. Fighting is messy and unpredictable, and frankly, you're not worth the paperwork. I started walking in a slow circle around him. But I do want to show you something. What? I pointed to one of the boxcars. See that one? The door's open. Take a look inside. He hesitated, then walked over and peered into the dark interior. That's when I moved, slamming the heavy doors shut and dropping the external latch into place. Matt! His voice was muffled but panicked. What the hell are you doing? Teaching you about consequences, I called back. See, Greg, you've been operating under the assumption that there wouldn't be any. You could steal another man's wife, move into his house, confuse his children, and nothing bad would happen to you. The banging started immediately, along with shouting that grew increasingly frantic. Let me out! This is kidnapping! Relax. You've got air holes, and I left your phone right here on the ground where you can see it through the slats. In about an hour, I'll come back and let you out. Think of it as a timeout. I walked away, leaving him screaming threats and promises. His phone started ringing almost immediately, probably Elise wondering where he was. I counted 17 calls before it finally stopped. An hour later, I returned to find him sitting quietly in the corner of the boxcar, his expensive shirt soaked with sweat and his perfectly styled hair a mess. Ready to have that conversation now? I asked, lifting the latch. He stumbled out, gasping in the fresh air like he'd been underwater. His hands were shaking, and there were tear tracks on his cheeks. You're insane, he whispered. No, Greg. I'm focused. There's a difference. I picked up his phone and handed it to him. 23 missed calls from Elise. She must be worried sick. You should probably call her back. He grabbed the phone and started dialing with trembling fingers. Greg? Elise's voice was loud enough for me to hear. Where have you been? I've been calling for hours. I'm fine. Just got held up. Held up where? You were supposed to be at the office an hour ago. He looked at me, and I smiled pleasantly. Just some car trouble, he said finally. I'll be there soon. After he hung up, we stood in silence for a moment. A train whistle sounded in the distance, and I watched him flinch. Here's what's going to happen, Greg. You're going to stay away from my children. You're going to stop playing house in my home. And you're going to think real carefully about whether Elise is worth what's coming next. What's coming next? Phase 4. I walked away, leaving him standing alone in the rail yard. In my rearview mirror, I could see him still standing there, staring at the boxcar like it might come alive and swallow him again. That evening, Mrs. Gage called to tell me she'd seen Greg's car parked at the Riverside Motel instead of my driveway. Trouble in paradise? She asked. Something like that, I said. Phase 3 was complete. Time to turn up the heat. Murphy's Pub had been the town's social center for 30 years, the kind of place where everyone knew your business, and most people didn't mind sharing it. Friday nights drew the usual crowd: off-duty cops, construction workers, insurance agents, and real estate people. It was also where Elise and Greg had been showing up regularly, playing the happy couple for anyone who'd watch. I arrived early and took a seat at the bar, nursing a beer and catching up with Tommy Murphy, the owner's son who'd taken over when his father retired. Heard you were back, Tommy said, polishing glasses with practiced efficiency. Sorry about the situation with Elise. News travels fast. Small town. Plus, your neighbor Mrs. Gage comes in for fish and chips every Wednesday. She's got opinions about what's been happening on Maple Street. I bet she does. The door chimed, and I didn't need to look to know who'd arrived. The conversations around the bar shifted, that subtle change that happens when drama walks into a room. Elise wore a red dress that was probably supposed to make her look confident, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. Greg was right behind her, staying close like a bodyguard. They took a table in the corner, trying to look casual while obviously scanning the room. When Elise spotted me at the bar, her face went pale. Matt, she said, appearing at my elbow. What are you doing here? Having a beer in my hometown bar. Is that allowed, or do I need permission from the new management? Don't start, please. Start what? I'm just sitting here, minding my own business. I turned to Tommy. Another beer, please. Greg materialized beside her, trying to look protective and intimidating. It might have worked better if I hadn't seen him crying in a boxcar 3 days earlier. We don't want any trouble, he said. Funny thing about trouble, Greg. It has a way of finding people whether they want it or not. That's when Jenna Walsh walked in. Elise's best friend and coworker, the one who'd probably been covering for the affair from the beginning. She headed straight for their table without noticing me, her voice carrying across the room. Elise, thank God you're here. We need to talk about what happened at the office today. I watched Elise's face change from nervous to terrified in the span of a heartbeat. Not here, Jenna. But the HR thing. Not here. Too late. The damage was done, and everyone in the bar had heard enough to start speculating. I finished my beer and left money on the bar. Tommy, thanks for the drink. See you around. As I walked past their table, I stopped just long enough to lean down and whisper to Elise. You might want to check your work email when you get home. I hear HR's been asking questions. Outside, I sat in my truck and waited. It took exactly 11 minutes for them to come rushing out, Elise on her phone, and Greg looking like he wanted to punch something. The next morning, Wyatt called with an update. Your friend Tracy Morrison had a very interesting conversation with her father, the judge, yesterday. Seems she's concerned about Greg being around children, especially given his history of unstable behavior. How concerned? Concerned enough that the judge is ordering a psychological evaluation as part of the custody hearing. Also concerned enough that she's planning to attend the hearing as a character witness. For which side? Take a guess. That afternoon, I was working in the garage when Max came running in, his face flushed with excitement and confusion. Dad, Mom's here, and she's really mad about something. Through the window, I could see Elise getting out of her car, her movements sharp and angry. She'd been crying, her makeup was smudged, and her usually perfect hair was disheveled. Stay inside, buddy. I'll handle this. I met her in the driveway, noting that Greg wasn't with her. Trouble in paradise, apparently. You got me fired, she said without preamble. Did I? How'd I manage that? Don't play dumb. Someone sent HR copies of all my sick day requests from the past 6 months, along with photos of me with Greg on those same days. They called it fraudulent use of company benefits. That does sound serious. Who would do such a thing? You know damn well who did it. I shrugged. Could have been anyone. Lots of people saw you two around town on your sick days. Maybe someone at the office got tired of covering your workload. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a hiss. I know it was you. Just like I know you're behind Greg's business problems and that psycho ex-girlfriend showing up at his office. Greg has business problems and an ex-girlfriend? Sounds like you didn't do much research before you picked your new boyfriend. This isn't over, Matt. You're right. It's not. She got back in her car and drove off, tires squealing on the asphalt. Through the garage window, I could see Max and Lila watching with wide eyes. Is Mom okay? Lila asked when I came back inside. Mom's going through a difficult time right now, sweetheart. But you don't need to worry about it. That's grown-up stuff. Are you and Mom getting divorced? The question I'd been dreading, asked in the innocent voice of a 7-year-old who just wanted her family to make sense again. Yes, honey, we are. Is it because of that man who was staying at the house? Smart kid. Too smart for her own good. It's because sometimes grown-ups make choices that hurt other people. And when that happens, sometimes families have to change. That night, after the kids were asleep, I sat on the porch and planned the final phase. Elise was unemployed, Greg was losing his business, and their relationship was cracking under the pressure. But I wasn't done yet, not even close. The custody hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in Judge Morrison's courtroom. I arrived early with Bill Davidson, wearing my dress uniform and carrying a folder thick with evidence. Elise was already there with her Portland lawyer, looking nervous and whispering urgently about strategy. Greg sat in the gallery, trying to look supportive, but mostly just looking uncomfortable. He'd lost weight over the past 2 weeks, and his expensive clothes hung loose on his frame. The stress was eating him alive. All rise for the Honorable Judge Morrison. Judge Morrison was a stern woman in her 60s who'd been handling family court for 20 years. She'd seen every kind of custody dispute and had no patience for games or manipulation. This is the matter of Harlan versus Harlan, custody of minor children Max and Lila. Counselor Davidson, you may proceed. Bill stood and began laying out our case methodically. The affair, documented with photographs and witness testimony. The fraudulent sick days, proven with employment records. Greg's criminal history and restraining order, complete with police reports and court documents. Your Honor, Mrs. Harlan abandoned her parental responsibilities to pursue an extramarital relationship with a man who has a documented history of unstable and threatening behavior toward women. She moved this individual into the family home while Sergeant Harlan was deployed overseas, exposing the children to an inappropriate and potentially dangerous situation. Elise's lawyer tried to counter, painting me as a controlling husband who couldn't accept his wife's happiness. It was a weak argument, and everyone in the courtroom knew it. Then Tracy Morrison took the stand. Miss Morrison, what is your relationship to the defendant Gregory Dunlap? He's my ex-boyfriend. I have a restraining order against him for harassment and threatening behavior. Can you describe the incident that led to this restraining order? Greg has a temper. When things don't go his way, he gets violent. He threw a drink at me in a restaurant, followed me home, and threatened to make me sorry for breaking up with him. He also made threats about what he'd do if I ever dated anyone else. Have you observed this behavior with other people? Yes, I've seen him lose his temper with waiters, store clerks, anyone he thinks isn't showing him proper respect. He's especially bad with children. He has no patience and tends to raise his voice when they don't immediately do what he wants. Elise's face had gone white. Apparently, Greg hadn't shared all the details of his past. Miss Morrison, in your opinion, should Gregory Dunlap be around minor children without supervision? Absolutely not. The final nail in the coffin came from Mrs. Gage, who testified about the comings and goings at my house, the late-night arguments she'd overheard, and the times she'd seen my children standing at their bedroom window, looking confused and scared. Judge Morrison's ruling was swift and decisive. Custody of the minor children Max and Lila Harlan is awarded to their father, Sergeant Matthew Harlan. Mrs. Harlan is granted supervised visitation every other weekend, pending completion of family counseling. Mr. Dunlap is prohibited from any contact with the children pending resolution of his legal issues. Outside the courthouse, Elise was in full meltdown mode, screaming at her lawyer while Greg tried unsuccessfully to calm her down. This isn't over, she yelled at me across the parking lot. You think you've won, but this isn't over. Actually, I called back, I think it is. That evening I was cooking dinner for Max and Lila when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I could see a young woman with a camera and a microphone. Sergeant Harlan? I'm Jennifer Walsh from Channel 8 News. We'd like to ask you about the custody case and the allegations against Gregory Dunlap. No comment, I said through the door. We've received information that Mr. Dunlap has been involved in several questionable business deals and may have defrauded investors. Would you care to respond? I opened the door just wide enough to look at her directly. Ma'am, I'm a soldier, not a businessman. If you have questions about Mr. Dunlap's business practices, I suggest you ask him. She tried a few more questions, but I closed the door and went back to making spaghetti. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. Matt, it's Wyatt. You need to turn on Channel 8. The news story was devastating. Greg's business was under investigation for fraud. 3 investors were suing him for misrepresentation, and the state licensing board was reviewing his real estate license. The reporter had done her homework, connecting his restraining order to the custody case and painting a picture of a man whose life was unraveling in spectacular fashion. The final shot showed Greg leaving his office with a box of personal belongings, while reporters shouted questions he refused to answer. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You destroyed my life. I hope you're happy. I showed it to Bill the next morning. That's harassment, he said. We can get another restraining order. No need. Greg's about to have bigger problems than me. I was right. By Friday, the local paper ran a front-page story about the fraud investigation, complete with interviews from angry investors and former business partners. Greg's picture was right there for everyone to see, looking haggard and defeated. The final piece fell into place the following Monday. I was at the grocery store when I ran into Jenna Walsh, Elise's former best friend and the same last name as the reporter who'd broken the Greg story. Matt, she said, looking embarrassed. I wanted to apologize. I had no idea what was really going on. Don't worry about it, Jenna. I feel terrible. I covered for Elise so many times, made excuses for her behavior. If I'd known what she was putting you and the kids through, you couldn't have known. Actually, I did know. Deep down, I knew something wasn't right. But she was my friend, and I thought I was being loyal. She paused, looking uncomfortable. There's something else. My sister Jennifer, she's the reporter who did that story about Greg. She got an anonymous tip about his business problems. Someone sent her a whole file of documents and evidence. Anonymous tips can come from anywhere. Yes, she said, smiling slightly. They can. That evening, I was helping Max with his homework when Elise called. The kids need to know I'm not the bad guy here, she said, without preamble. The kids don't need to know anything except that they're loved and safe. You've destroyed everything, Matt. My job, my relationship, my reputation. Are you satisfied? I didn't destroy anything, Elise. I just stopped protecting you from the consequences of your choices. Greg's leaving town. His business is ruined. He's facing criminal charges, and it's all because of you. It's all because of him, and you. I just made sure the truth came out. I hate you. I know, but the kids don't have to. She hung up, and I went back to helping Max with his math homework. Outside, Maple Street looked peaceful and normal again. Mrs. Gage waved from her porch, and I waved back. 2 days later, Wyatt called with the final update. Greg's gone. Packed up and left town yesterday. Word is he's headed to Florida, trying to stay ahead of the fraud charges. What about Elise? Moved in with her sister in Portland. Lost the house in the divorce settlement. Can't find work because of the HR thing. I heard she's working at a call center now. And the kids are home where they belong, with their father. That night, after Max and Lila were asleep, I sat on my porch with a beer and thought about justice. Not the dramatic, Hollywood kind with explosions and dramatic confrontations, but the real kind. The kind that comes from patience, planning, and letting people face the natural consequences of their actions. Elise had wanted to trade up, to replace her deployed soldier husband with a flashier model. Greg had wanted to play house with another man's family without any of the responsibility. They'd both gotten exactly what they deserved. My phone buzzed with one final text from Greg's number. You won. I hope it was worth it. I typed back. It was. Then I blocked the number, finished my beer, and went inside to check on my children. Some wars you win by surviving. This one? I survived. They didn't.